Good morning, and welcome to Issues That Matter. And I am your host, Robert Picone, and we are honored and pleased to have Victoria Foley as a guest. And Victoria is going to be, or is a candidate for District 12, Maine State House of Representatives, representing the city of Biddeford. And Victoria, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Very nice to have you. Very nice to have you. What brought you to what you're doing now, running for state rep?
Well, it started when I bought my house in Biddeford. I think that would probably be the root of all this. I fell in love with the city and I moved here and started to get involved. And a year ago in June, I was appointed to city council and discovered that there's a really great opportunity to have a voice for what is changing in our city. And I think I can really amplify that at the state level. And with the support of, many people, takes a village, I got really excited about the idea of running for office for District 12.
Now, you said you got appointed, or how did you get the city council? I forget the word. There was a word that you used.
Appointment. Yeah.
Okay, you were appointed.
So, and then I ran for election too. So it's kind of it was a two-step process, shall we say. So I had already joined the Downtown Development Commission. I had introduced myself to the mayor after I moved here, and he told me about the different committees that there were to get involved with, and so I ended up on the DDC, which is really exciting. I live downtown, and there's lots of change happening there, as we all know. So I started there, and in June, Bob Mills, who was the prior city councilor for the district, he and his family moved to a different home in a different part of the city, and when that happened, he couldn't serve on the council in that seat anymore. So I called Mr. Mayor and said, listen, I'm sure you've got a long list of people who would like to do this, but just think of me. And if you've got a spot, I'd love to be considered. Turned out the list was shorter than I thought. So I met with the council president and with the mayor, and we talked about it, and then they put me forward for appointment. So that's how that started. And then it was an election year last year, as many will remember. So I ran for election, and I was unopposed in my first election, which was very exciting. And also, a great honor, because to have been appointed and then to be able to run and retain the seat, meant a lot to me, for sure, to be a voice.
And now you're taking another step forward.
Yep.
And running for state rep, representing the city of Biddeford.
That's right.
Now, what exactly, I know districts are sometimes engender numerous different communities. What exactly is the community that you'll be representing? I know it's the city of Biddeford.
Yeah, it's part of Biddeford. So Representative Ryan Fecteau, who's also running for re-election, he's in District 11. So that encompasses Biddeford, part of Biddeford, and also part of Arundel, and I think maybe even down to Kennebunk. I'm not quite sure where his lines are drawn. But for me, District 12 is really the downtown core of Biddeford, sort of Elm Street toward Biddeford Pool, and it goes out to about Libby Avenue, so on Pool Street. So it's a bit of a U shape of Biddeford. West Street is the northern boundary. So it's really it's a lot of the people who I already know from representing them as their city councilor, and then people that I'm meeting who are in, I guess, wards 4, 3, and 2. Yeah, kind of out that way.
So your time in politics has been relatively, I'll say right now, it's, how many years have you been involved in politics? You probably already said it.
Well, it'll be a year next month. Okay. But I've been doing a lot of service work for many years.
What do you do with the rest of your life?
A lot. Well, my day job is the director of marketing for an oncology practice in Scarborough, New England Cancer Specialists, and I do that work. I've been there coming up on 3 years now. And they do phenomenal work. And then in my volunteer life, I've done a bunch of different volunteer roles. I started volunteering with Girls on the Run Maine about 6 years ago, and I still support them today. They help elementary school age girls gain confidence as they head toward middle school so they can become joyful and thriving young women. I volunteer now on the Heart of Biddeford. I sit on the board and I work on the organizing committee. I serve as a volunteer board member on the Shuttle Bus Zoom committee, because sustainable transportation is really interesting to me. I think that's a real way we
that's a hot button for me as well.
I think it's so important. And then I also am the chair of the board at Greater Portland Health, which is a federally qualified health center in Portland and South Portland right now, with continual expansion happening. They serve low income and the underserved communities in our state.
How much time do you get to spend with your family? You sound like a busy person.
I squeeze it in. I squeeze it in. I have a partner, Kevin Rooney. He's going to be a new Biddefordite in the future, and I have 2 rescue dogs. And I made my life a little easier because I bought my home, and then a year later, my parents bought the house across the street. So, so they came to me.
You got the automatic babysitter.
That's right. That's right. They're right in Biddeford, so it's lovely. Yeah.
And wonderful. That Kevin Rooney, that name sounds familiar.
He's a Navy veteran, and he works at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard now. You may have seen his name in the paper when they did the profile on my candidacy. I'm not sure, but he's not involved in politics himself,
Where
which
does
is
he live?
kind of nice. He lives in South Berwick at the moment. He has a house down there.
I thought maybe he lived in Kennebunk.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. The name sounds familiar, but
Maybe you've seen him around
Rooney
town.
is not exactly a.
It's not a common name. No.
Well, I think I know a few people named Rooney, and I don't travel a lot of different circles.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Perhaps he's from Florida originally, so he's adjusting to our Maine winters.
What goals do you see? What goals do you have you set for yourself relative to what you can do for the city? Once you become representative, where do you see the city going? What are the challenges that the city has?
Well, the city, I think, has a lot of opportunities and already has seen a lot of success. I mean, we have great development happening downtown. We have great development happening in the surrounding areas. We're seeing a reduction in the number of homes for sale, which is of concern to me. I think we need to make sure people can afford to stay and live in their community. But what I'm passionate about is access to health care. I've done a lot of work in that area. I've done a lot of volunteering in that area, and we need to support healthcare in our state. We're an older state, we're an aging state, and we also have a lot of people who are new to the state and people who are younger who aren't able to access the care that they need.
You mentioned we are an aging state, and a lot of people don't realize that I've made mention of it a few times, I'm sure, on the show. Yes, we are an aging state, but we are also the most aged state in the country.
It's true.
On 2 different factors. Number 1, aging population or aged population, and number 2, our housing stock is the oldest in the nation, which opens up a raft of obstacles for people, older people, getting around in their home.
Yes.
Back in the 1920s, homes were not built to accommodate wheelchairs.
Yep. You're absolutely right.
I would venture to say that you have a lot of homes that have wheelchairs in them, and you have to making those accommodations is not something that's easy to do.
And that's another area that's of great concern to me. The city of Biddeford has done a good job getting underway with age-friendly community work.
Yep.
But at the state level, we need to make sure that we can support caregivers and older adults who wish to stay in their homes so that we can do that and allow them to be there as long as they wish. And you're right, that requires modifications. It requires maybe some tax credits to help them modify their homes so that they can
we've already
access
done that. We got tax credits.
Yep.
Now the challenge is getting people to know about them so that they can utilize them.
Absolutely.
It can be confusing because you got to spend the money before you get the tax credit.
Right, and that can be scary if you don't understand how the system works and how you're going to be reimbursed. Absolutely. And I think those things kind of go together. When it comes to expanding healthcare, the voters have already said they want Medicaid expansion, and we haven't done that yet. The state has not done that. They need to do that.
Well, I have a question to that. And it may not be an easy question to answer, but I'll give it a shot.
All right.
Back a few years ago, we went down the road of Medicaid expansion, and it ended up busting the budget and left the hospitals holding the bag. And then eventually, the current governor stepped in, became governor, and he ended up paying off the hospitals, which was a wonderful thing, a great thing. What is different? What has changed in the law? Is there anything different in the law today that they're trying to pass that makes it different from the law that they did pass back then, which ended up failing?
Well, I think it's the support from the federal government in this round. There's more support financially from the federal government to help with the implementation of Medicaid expansion. And they've shown that if we were to expand Medicaid, that we could cover the costs as a state. That, not that the state would cover the costs, I'm saying that in a way that I don't particularly feel is clear. The costs that the governor has said are going to be borne by the citizens is not quite accurate. They've shown that they can cover the cost of Medicaid expansion without an undue burden on the taxpayers of Maine.
I do know that the Attorney General for the state made mention of that.
Yeah.
But when the mention was made, it said we can cover the cost this year.
Yes.
What about the ensuing years?
So one of the things I think is interesting about Medicaid expansion is it's a lot of allowing people access to preventive care. And when you're able to do that, when someone is able to get the care that they need when they need it, it means that you have a reduced burden and a reduced cost on emergency rooms, on urgent care, on surgeries and other procedures that become an emergency if someone hasn't had the appropriate preventive care in the first place. So as we expand Medicaid and we make sure that people are able to get the preventive care that they need, then we reduce the burden and the cost on those other systems. So we pay for it this year, and then in the future, our costs start to decline because we have fewer people who are in an emergency situation because they now have care.
All right. I'll let that fly.
Yeah, all right.
Time will tell.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you at the health center where I volunteer, right now our Medicare and Maine Care rate is 11%. And if they expand Medicaid, the number of people who would gain care would go up by 13%. So now we're talking a quarter of our patient load is suddenly able to access health insurance and health care, which is a huge jump. And when you see that, you see a lot less emergency.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
All right. I don't argue with people. I'm not arguing. I'm simply asking a question.
All right.
And you answered it very well.
Well, thank you.
You're quite welcome. The waterfront.
Yes.
How do you see the waterfront development taking place? Or do you see a waterfront development taking place?
There is quite a bit going on now, yeah. We have the Riverwalk Master Plan. I think the Riverwalk is going to be a real draw for tourists to the city of Biddeford, and it will allow us to highlight the history of the city while also introducing new people who may not have come for that reason. I think you have people who look to visit places for the history, and then you also have people who sort of wander around and find themselves somewhere. And the Riverwalk is also a way for us to highlight the river without developing it privately. I think it's important that we have waterfront access for our citizens, and we don't want to sell that all away to developers. At the same time, we need to make sure that we can have some activity down by the water. Right now we have great development happening in the mills and more to come.
Yep.
And then we have some spaces that are currently underused that I'd like to see become a little bit more of a destination.
You know, when you mentioned the term Riverwalk, it draws me to Providence, Rhode Island.
Oh, yeah.
Where they have done what I remember to be, and this goes back a number of years now, but they had done a wonderful job.
Yeah.
And creating a wonderful experience for people with the nighttime gondola rides.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
I mean, it was beautiful, beautiful.
Well, it helps to connect the downtown for people and give them a destination, even if they don't necessarily always want to go down and have dinner. They could go for a walk. They could enjoy nature very close to their home. You know, we're really blessed, I think, to live in a city that has such great proximity to the coast. Now that presents its own challenges, but...
The challenges. What challenges do you see it presenting?
Well, development is one. I think that access to the coast is important, and we need to make sure that we don't sell it all away as much as we can avoid. You know, somebody from Biddeford who may not have the wherewithal financially to buy a home on Biddeford Pool, for example, shouldn't be restricted from ever seeing a beach. That doesn't make sense to me. But at the same time, we need to think about the property taxes. How are we managing property taxes for folks? Because we have this very valuable coastal real estate.
Well, okay, go ahead.
Well, and then, of course, the environment. You know, we hear a lot about how climate change is going to affect our coastlines, and we need to make sure that as a city we're preparing for that. The city council talked a lot about mitigating the risks of flood insurance and thinking about, you know, what that means for homeowners. They just redid the flood maps in the last year, and we've challenged some of those results because we think they're based on a model that doesn't necessarily reflect our coastline. But it's of great concern because once you enter into a flood zone, your insurance and your taxes and all of those things change quite a bit.
Yes. You're speaking with someone who came out of the insurance industry.
Right.
That the personal market insurance industry, which flood insurance was a part of it, part of what we did, and yes, it is very costly. And the cost of, not only the cost of insurance, but the cost of living, of housing, is, and I have a particular, Kennebunk, we're developing a whole new high school campus.
Oh, yeah.
Now, and I'm speaking personally, I'm not all that comfortable with having a high school campus. It's a high school.
Right. Well, are they talking about multiple buildings? Is that what makes it a
multiple
campus?
It's going to be big.
Yeah.
I can't see it all from the road, but they're making a lot of modifications, and I would venture to say a lot of improvements. But you mentioned something earlier. People affording the taxes in their home to keep their house.
Yes.
And my concern is, with all of this money being spent for the school, how much is that going to increase the taxes? And how many people might be losing their homes because they can't afford to pay the taxes?
Right. In Kennebunk, you mean?
In Kennebunk.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are other communities that are suffering
Right.
from the same thing.
Certainly.
But it's a concern. It's a real concern that I have, because I know the cost of the community is ever increasing.
Yep.
And it's not going to be, if it ever starts going down in the other direction, it ain't going to happen soon. And how many people are going to be negatively affected? Right. In the interim.
Right.
And it's a concern of mine, as is transportation.
Yes. Yeah. Transportation is so critical. So critical. I commute right now to work in Scarborough, and as I do that, I see the burden on the Turnpike and the burden on Route 1. We have a lot of people who are being pushed further away from the economic center of Portland, who now need to travel back and forth to that area, and our highways and our infrastructure are not necessarily designed to handle that sort of load when it's one person in a car. So how do we creatively think about ways to increase the use of transportation so that people are out of their cars? We have fewer cars, individual cars on the road, but we still provide a service that's accessible, clean, safe, all of those things, and convenient. You know, that's the huge
And
key.
I think doing that goes against what the natural inclination is for people in our country.
Yeah.
And people don't necessarily want to travel on public transportation when they have a car available.
It's true. Yep.
And back in my days with the National Able Network, the observation that I made was, I live in Kennebunk. If I live in Kennebunk and I want to and I don't have a car, I live in Kennebunk, there's a job that I'd be perfect for in Saco. There's no way for me to get from Kennebunk to Saco on public transportation that's affordable.
That's right.
Yeah, I could take a taxi, but taxis cost a lot of money.
Absolutely. Yep.
There's no affordable way to do it. It strikes me that there should be some type of system that goes from one community that you can get from Kennebunk to Saco or South Portland or Portland.
Yep.
Without having to change buses, because if you're handicapped, getting on and off a bus isn't easy.
That's right. That's right. I hear you. And I've heard from constituents, both in the past year and more recently, that transportation is a big concern for them. They can't get to and from the grocery store necessarily. Yep. They can't get to and from job opportunities. I think that's the real key. And I've heard from employers in our downtown who say, I've had people have to turn down employment with my company because they cannot get here from Portland, or they cannot get here reliably or in a convenient way from Kennebunk or Sanford or wherever it might be that they live. And that's a real issue, because as Maine continues to be the oldest state in the nation, how are we encouraging young people to come here? And when you think about, there was a period of time when I lived in Toronto out of college and I was working there when I didn't have a car. And I didn't need one because they had excellent public transportation. Now, Toronto is a huge city. It's not always possible to do a complete network, but I think that we do need to start looking very seriously at how we make transportation connections that make sense based on where our workforce is living.
And and this is a thought that just came to my mind.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about what you said earlier about transportation, our highway system.
Yeah.
And the number of vehicles that we have on the highway. If we can get people onto buses, wonderful.
Yeah.
We can reduce the vehicular traffic.
Mm-hmm.
But they got to be able to go someplace.
That's right.
You're not going to want to get on the highway to go from Kennebunk to Biddeford or Kennebunk to Saco. But if we had some type of public transportation system, intercommunity, that was all in synchronization with each other, scheduling and so forth, which I realize is probably a monumental task. But I gotta believe that there are people out there that can figure it out.
I agree. And I mean, Shuttle Bus Zoom is doing some of that work. They have currently the Zoom buses that go from Biddeford to Portland and South Portland and Scarborough. They stop along the way throughout the communities. So they are positioned to be a commuter bus.
The next question would be, how accessible are they for the handicapped?
Yeah, and they know that they're working to increase accessibility. They have some fabulous people working for them, including their mobility manager, who works not only with those who are differently abled, but also elders, to make sure that the buses are meeting their needs and that they know how to access them. So it's, like you say, it's a monumental task to connect all of the communities. But I think that we're starting to think that way, especially as Biddeford becomes a community where people are commuting out increasingly to jobs in other cities, which, I mean, one of my real priorities is economic development in the city of Biddeford to allow people to stay and work here. I would love for them to not have to go somewhere else to work.
You robbed me of a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you what your plans are for economic development.
Yeah.
But you've already opened the door, so continue to walk through it.
Well, there it is. So we've got lots of opportunity for small business in Biddeford. We have a great climate of small business owners already. I think we need to continue to drive that. We have some folks that I think understand that their buildings can be a real launch pad for entrepreneurs. And of course, parking is a concern for those.
I know parking has been a problem in the city. And I have a hard time referring to Biddeford as a city for some reason. I don't know.
It's because everyone is so friendly. It feels like a small town, but you have all the benefits of a city. I was just saying that to some folks this morning at Palestiner, as a matter of fact. They were visitors from out of town, and they said, well, what do you like about Biddeford? I said, well, I love that it feels like a small town. I feel like I know my neighbors. I feel like I know the people I see around town. But at the same time, if I need something at Target, it's not too far to go get it.
Yeah.
I can do a lot of business downtown right now. I'd love to be able to do more.
Now, why did you say Target, not Walmart?
Well, I prefer Target.
Walmart's one of my favorites. Wally World is one of my favorites.
It is?
Yes.
Well, to each their own, I guess. But yeah, I think that that's one of the great assets Biddeford has, is we have a small town feel with the amenities of a city.
Yep. Very good.
Yeah. I don't want to rob you of any more questions, Bob.
I think I've covered all the questions I've wanted to cover, so we can just have some friendly conversation here for a little while.
All right.
And where do you see yourself going in the future?
Ooh, where do you mean? How do you mean? In what regard?
My experience tells me that representatives spend their share of time in the House of Representatives, but eventually they decide that time for them to move up in the political world.
Oh, well, I never really saw myself becoming a politician, so I don't know where I would go after state representative. I think that You and I were talking earlier about how it's incumbent on each of us to make the best of the hand that we're dealt. And so I feel like I've been given and found a lot of opportunities in the last couple of years to be a voice for a community that I love very much. And I think I'd like to continue to be that voice as long as it's helpful and useful. I think it's important we have strong representation in Augusta. I think we have some great folks up there now doing that work, and I'd like to become one of them. And it troubles me that we've seen so much division in politics, and I think that that's really one of the reasons that drove me to want to run.
What do you see as some of the feeding factors to that? Because I agree with you 115, 120, 200%. Absolutely, and I think that feeds into so many of the other issues and problems that we have in our society today. Is our inability to effectively communicate. Where do you see the linchpin? Where do you see the roadblock?
I think we've stopped listening to each other, and I think that we've lost sight of the idea that we can accomplish a whole lot more when we come together and find areas where we do agree. I think many times we all want the same end result. We all want people to be able to get the care they need, for example. We all want to make sure that people have jobs that pay them well, that they can have a family and raise that family in their community. We all want to make sure that we're taxed fairly and not unfairly, and that our money is well spent. The differences in how we get there are where we have the party system.
The goal is the same. It's the route to get there that where the difference lies. You're absolutely
right.
Yeah,
but then we stop listening to each other's routes. And I find that really disappointing. I think when I was starting out in my career, one of my mentors said to me, you don't always have to agree with someone's opinion, but you do need to respect it. You need to hear them when they talk to you about it.
You need to respect it.
Yeah. And I think that has really guided the way that I've tried to live my life. You and I might not agree on certain things. I might not agree with people I work with or people that I sit on the council with from time to time, but that doesn't mean that I don't respect their right to have those opinions and honor my need to listen to what their opinion is fully and consider how I might find areas where I compromise with
And
them.
I would take it one step further and have it not necessarily impact how you feel about that person.
Certainly.
You can disagree with a perspective that they have.
Yeah.
But you should never lose respect because of that disagreement.
Yep.
And that's how you end up working effectively with people.
It's true.
You got to break down those barriers.
I was thinking that we just went through the budget process at the city level, and there were areas where the council disagreed with each other, where different members were not all in alignment. But we talked it out, and we did that all on camera because those meetings are televised. And I was really proud that at the end of that, we disagreed on certain things, but we all respected one another and we were all civil in our disagreement, and it didn't affect our relationships with each other outside of that discussion.
Yep.
Which I think is a huge statement about the value of doing that.
Well, I think back to the days of Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, where they would be in vehement disagreement over an issue and debate the issue endlessly. But at the end of the day, they went out and had a drink together.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to get to.
Yeah.
We have to get in that mode, and we have gone directly opposite of that. And the first thing we tend to have a tendency to do, or many people have a tendency to do, is fight it out. That doesn't get us anyplace.
No. There are a lot of ways to be a good person.
And I attended the kickoff of Martin the other day, and that's one of the things that he spoke about. Get over the disagreement, get through the disagreement, and start agreeing on things, and start working together.
Yep.
To make the disagreement disappear.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense to me.
More listening, more compromising. Well, compromise is maybe not quite the word. More understanding, common understanding, shall we say. Because nobody wants to feel like they've compromised their values. But we can talk together about how to come together.
You can compromise on the issue without compromising your values.
Yes.
You can find that middle ground.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, and that's why legislators get paid the big bucks. Now, I know it is, as a
They
state,
do?
as a state legislator, you don't get paid the big bucks. Go up to the federal level, now you're getting paid the big bucks.
That's true. The federal level, they do make quite a bit, don't they?
And
Yeah.
I don't find
That's a hard job.
I don't find I don't find the federal government to be all that congenial with each other.
No, not right now.
They're constantly battering each other back and forth. You can't blame one party more or less than you can blame the other. They're both guilty.
I wonder if it's because they're further away from their constituents sometimes, because I think we lose sight of the fact that the reason that we do this is for the people that we serve, right? I don't do it for me. It's not because Victoria Foley has these ideas about, what she thinks it should be. Of course, I have ideas, but I work for constituents. I work for other people.
One of the observations that I make whenever I get the opportunity to make it, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to make it now, is that over the course of time, our system of government has gotten turned upside down. Our legislators tend to treat us like we are their serfs. They are the leaders. We are their serfs. We are here to do their bidding. They tell us what to do, and they hold themselves harmless and say, well, we don't have to follow that law. But our people do. There's something wrong with that picture. And it's relatively rampant at the federal level. I won't say the state level. I think the congeniality at the state level is much better.
I agree. But at the same time, there are ways in which the state is not listening to the voters. And I think we need to get back to that too. Like who are legislators to disregard the will of the voters? Who's the governor to disregard the will of the voters?
If the people have spoken, and part of the role of government is to deal with the world of possibilities.
Yes. Yeah.
And
that's true.
Sometimes the people at the street level don't know all of the mitigating factors that might come into play. So you do need some leadership at the government side, but it's got to be reasonable leadership. And if the voters say that they want something, that it's the responsibility of all people in government to try and find a way to make this happen.
Agreed. Yes.
You better be careful. You're agreeing with me.
Well, on this we agree.
A lot of logical people would not agree with me, and you can speak to the people in the control room, and they would tell you the same thing. But you're right. We've got to find a way to break down the walls that take place between people, simply because you disagree on a minor factor, and you end up losing sight of the big picture.
Yeah. And the big picture is really the most important part right now. As we've said several times during this interview, as Maine continues to age, we need to bring in new people. How are we doing that? What are all the ways that we're doing that? And while we're bringing new people in, how are we respecting the history that we have behind us? And how are we making sure that our older residents and those who've been here a long time are still able to stay as long as they wish?
That's the challenge. Now, I'll grant you that I am getting older, and I may, at some point, I may be that old person, which does raise me some significant concern. But I am also very concerned about how that old person today, and I don't like using the term old, that aged person today, who might have difficulty getting around, not because of any handicap, but just simply because they have difficulty getting around.
Yep.
What can we do to make our society and make our way of life more comfortable for them? Because we owe them that. We owe them that responsibility.
Yep, I completely agree. My grandfather is in his late 80s and lives in the home that he and my grandmother bought more than 50 years ago in South Portland. And he's able to do that because my aunt is able to be a primary caregiver for him, and my family is close by and we're able to assist. But I don't want that to be just because he had the benefit of being close to family. I would like our elders, no matter where they are, to have the support of caregivers or to be able to stay in their homes through some other means. I mean, think about the Meals on Wheels program that we run out of our community center here in Biddeford. That's extremely important. Yep. It's extremely important, and it's one of the many ways that we serve our elders and allow them to be in their homes. It all comes back to sustainable transportation as well. If I choose not to drive anymore as an older person, then what are my options? In the wintertime, are the sidewalks clear? Is it safe for me to get around? And are we making sure that those sorts of things are in place?
Interestingly, I visit a McDonald's restaurant just about every day, sometimes twice a day. And one of the people that are part of the group that I join is an elderly woman whose husband passed away fairly recently. And now she's in a position where she has to move out of Kennebunk, and she has to move to California to be with her daughter and son-in-law. Why? Because she does not have transportation. She doesn't feel comfortable driving anymore, so she got rid of her car, and now she has to move to California so she can live with her daughter and son-in-law out in California. And she really does not want to go, but now she's in a facility. She's in a beautiful facility. And the facility is walking distance away from the McDonald's restaurant, as an example.
So that's convenient.
That is convenient.
So
but
she's able to maintain a
in
social
the winter,
life.
She walks there.
Yeah. So in the winter.
And in the winter, they don't do such a great job shoveling the sidewalks at all times.
And that's not unique to Kennebunk. You know, it's not only our differently abled folks, people who are in wheelchairs or who have other mobility concerns, but it's also our elders, and cities around the state are struggling with that.
Yeah, it's a major challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are a lot of challenges out there, and we need good people in Augusta to try and solve the problem or try and make headway on these problems.
Yeah.
Not only in Augusta, but throughout the state.
Everywhere. They can start right here. You can start in the town where you are.
Well, Victoria, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, anybody who watches the show with frequency, they probably know that I'm going to say something now that I say it on just about every show I do. I'm not a big believer in one and done, which means that I fully anticipate having you on the show again, maybe as a state rep.
All right. Well, let's hope so.
And one of these days, I may see you up in Augusta.
Yeah, and I'd be pleased to come back anytime.
And I'll be pleased to have you as a guest. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Oh, one more question.
Okay.
I caught them. I know I caught them. They were thinking I was going to close the show. If there's one point that you would like people to remember from our conversation today, what would be your takeaway?
I would say that Biddeford is a really special place with a lot of opportunity and a lot of history, and I would be honored to be part of continuing that history and that opportunity for them in Augusta.
Excellent. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. And folks, I hope you enjoyed the show. I know I got a lot out of it. And coming into the show, I didn't know that I would be agreeing with Victoria that frequently. But now that we've had an opportunity to talk and get to know each other, guess what? I agree with her a lot more now than I did before. So it's been a pleasure, Victoria.
Thank you.
Folks, have a great day. Enjoy the weather. Have a great weekend. See you next week. Bye-bye.